decided by government. Now, in our Kickstarter, how teachers' strike is affecting rural learners. And joining us from Muyenga and on Zoom this morning for our Kickstarter debate is Mr. James Kasaga Arinitwe, who's the CEO Teach for Uganda. Good morning to you, Mr. Kasaga.
Good morning, Priscilla, and good morning, Uganda. How are you today?
We are fabulous.
We are fabulous. We just want to tackle this discussion with you a little bit further. Tell us first of all about Teach for Uganda.
Thank you. Teach for Uganda is a leading organization that works with young people, and our mission is to nurture leaders who are committed to advancing equitable access to quality education in low-income communities. So basically what that means is that we hire graduates, university graduates, who are coming out recently from university, and we prepare them. They can be teachers, they can be engineers, lawyers, whatever discipline, and we train you for a full month and prepare you and send you to rural communities to work to support our teachers, to support the school system, to ensure that our children have access to equitable quality education. And also we know that any graduate from Makere, from any community who comes to these rural communities, especially in our UPE schools, inspires these children to aim higher, to want to be like you, for example, Priscilla, to be like Chris. So that's what we do. And we are there for 2 years. We actually are a partner with government as well. And that's why right now, as we speak, some of those fellows are in the communities. Pardon me?
Go on.
At least meet those gaps that the children are facing right now.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. You have talked about equitable and then also quality education, but that's on the recipient of the children that get to receive this education. Now, on the side of teachers, what are some of the discrepancies, the grievances that have come through in your engagement as Teach for Uganda in these rural communities?
I mean, for us, this is a very contentious issue, and we have respect for teachers as well as our government, because each side has its own story, and we really don't try to take sides at Teach for Uganda. We are an organization that is here. First of all, our core value is children first. Number one core value is children first. So when we partnered with government, we were given a mandate to work in some of the most disadvantaged school communities, meaning that one, the passing rate for primary education, PLE, is very low. Two, they have shortage of teachers. Three, the numbers of children are high. The student-teacher ratio is almost 1 to 70 or 1 to 100 in some of these classrooms. So after COVID-19, we know that we combed all these communities in Mayuge, in Namutumba, and others to bring these children back to school. And so when they were returning to school, now that this strike has happened, it's almost like they're coming out of the frying pan and falling into the fire. And number one, let me share with us what affects the rural learner most is that they are depending on the teacher 99%. Not the similar situation with a Kampala child who comes home to daddy like myself, or to an uncle or an aunt who can actually go through their books and prepare them. So when we see this happening continuously, and the parties that do not work together to have a dialogue to solve it, the rural learner who are 80% of our Uganda, which is the future of Uganda, are missing out. I was asking myself and my wife, who is a physician, she's a doctor, and she's treated people with HIV, and she came through a UPE school. We asked ourselves, if at P7 and this industrial strike happened, would we be here? So our call is simple, is that could the parties that really come together and find a dialogue that ensures that at least there's a pathway for the children to be supported, especially candidate classes, as we work out the situation to ensure that then the teachers are remunerated the way they want or as they wish.
Students and pupils in rural schools are particularly disadvantaged because we don't see private facilities or private schools in places like, I keep referring to Butaleja, no doubt, I'll always do that. But just paint us the picture where the science teachers in the villages, of course, are not supposed to be striking because they've been attended to ostensibly as their peers in the urban areas. But the facilities there mean that even if they are teaching or they are appearing at school, there is no instruction going on. There are no laboratories, there are no facilities for them to instruct. Tell us, how is your organization, Teach Uganda, helping to foster that gap?
Teach for Uganda. Let me just correct you. That's Teach for Uganda. So thank you so much for that question. Actually, I was just talking to one of our program heads this morning when the industrial action happened. Unfortunately, the schools invited all teachers, not science teachers, not arts teachers, invited all teachers. And actually, they told students and pupils, especially our rural learners, that, okay, on this assembly, from now on, the teachers will not be coming to school. Therefore, you shouldn't come to class. And our fellows have been there trying to call parents and say, please bring them back to class. So there's almost that, going back and forth. But because of our respect of teachers and of course the leadership of the school, because we signed MOUs with the school as well, our fellows have decided now to support children the best they can within the communities. So as we speak today, there are some that are gathering those children in some of secondary schools and helping the candidate classes continue to learn while the industrial action is going on. Now, of the infrastructure issues and all those questions you're asking, honestly, that's not our mandate. For us, we are there to support the child. Government has its role to play in those communities, of course. Those infrastructure challenges are there. I cannot deny that they are not there. In fact, in some of the communities, with partners that we work with, like DHL, we have helped build some of those buildings. Like, for example, in Nabutakaluero, we erected a P4 classroom because the other one was falling down. So we do support, but that is when a partner that supports our work says, well, we have visited this community and we see that honestly, the children cannot be able to learn here. So can we be of support? We said, we welcome you to support us. But those are really not our issues. Our issue is to really ensure that our core value of child first, that they are attended to, because a rural learner, if they miss only one single day, they will actually, it can affect their lifetime opportunities.
That discrimination in remuneration is something that shouldn't be adopted, or the fact that government is putting science teachers on, rather considering them ahead of arts teachers, is a strategy that is worth taking?
That's a hard question. I really, personally, because also we care about equitable quality education for all our children in low-income communities, as well equitable remuneration for all teachers. Because when we think about it, we would love all teachers, for instance, I mean, you cannot divorce science from the arts. From our learnings, critical thinking is both in the arts, in literature, in language, as well as in mathematics or science. So for us, really, my take would be that there would be an amicable solution where all teachers are remunerated equal, because at the end of the day, we don't want to create a country that has, these two divisions or inequitable remuneration gaps that would cause these challenges. And I think really when you look at it, right now, again, the gridlock is around the issue of, different types of remunerations.
Right, Mr. Kasaga, I want to find out from you, which are the particular rural communities that you are working with under Teach for Uganda?
Thank you, Besra. So we launched in 2018 in Luwero as one of the closest districts to Kampala, but had all, to my sub-county, had all those challenges of teachers being shortage of teachers, having kids who were more than the teachers, having schools that were really failing. So we started there, and our work at the time was supported by the then State Minister Honorable Seninde, and Honorable Seninde and Honorable Kadaga at the time invited us to go to Mayuge, at the time to Busoga, because the challenge in Busoga was that there were schools that were failing consistently. So then we went to Mayuge in 2019, and then COVID hit. But even when COVID hit, we were still in Mayuge, and now we grew to Namutumba, and our 4th district as we speak that we support. We just signed an MOU with Kayunga district. And this is really to care for those children where we see lots of, for example, girl children drop out. So even in COVID, we were using innovations like digital learning that we introduced in these communities. We brought in tele-learning where parents would come together and sit down with the children while we are our fellows are in different communities. They would call on the phone, spend 15 minutes helping parents understand COVID, how you prevent it, how you wash your hands, how you use a mask. And then from there, they would talk to the children and encourage them not to drop out of school so that when schools resume, we can be able to actually be able to learn. And in some cases, they were able to deliver lessons and the children were learning.
Okay.
All right. I want to follow up by asking, before you went to the 4 districts that you have mentioned, in terms of teacher-student ratio, what were the ratios that you found? And now with the presence of your team on ground in these 4 area codes, what has turned out to be the ratio of student to teacher on ground presently, and what has been the impact of that on the child as far as receipt of education is concerned?
Question. Let me start with even just Luero, where we launched and actually we signed an MOU. First of all, we are partner with government, as I said. We place our fellows into rural UPE schools and those that are selected by the district. So we signed an MOU with the district of Luero and we launched at that time, there were about 10 schools that were really highly needy. And in one of the schools, I want to say Umeya, where we placed 2 of our leading fellows and that they supported the school. First of all, they found that the children at the school were not learning, were not really having a meal. And they worked with parents around how they can work with the school and the PTA and the school management committee to bring in at least each parent contributing a kilogram of maize, a kilogram of beans, and the children were eating a lunch meal, which already we know that research shows that when children are able to have a meal for the day, they are able to learn better. And let me tell you what, after that, when the kids graduated quickly, we had a young man for the first time in the last 20 years, Francis, who got a first grade in that school, and now has been given a scholarship to attend Namugongo Secondary School, a first grade. And the other children in P7 were able to succeed, and some are in Entebbe Secondary School and others. So what we see is that our fellows, when they come to these communities, because they are graduates, because they are trained, because they are skilled, because they have a coaching system, because we also bring in this holistic school transformation of training teachers, training head teachers, the school quickly catches up, brings parents on board, and it's actually a functional school. We know very well that a school itself is like an organization. So if the leadership is not working well, if the teachers are not present, then kids cannot learn. So what we do is that for us, we look at full school transformation, and the impact is like what I shared with you. We are seeing our young men and young women, our learners, actually getting the first, second grade that has ever been gotten in that community. First grade in 20 years for Francis, who is now going to be a doctor and has a dream of coming back to his community to build a hospital. And he's also an orphaned child who was being raised by a grandmother and his only mother. So for us, the impact is long term. The challenge with education is not like health, where you treat someone and then someone goes and gets better. You have to invest long term. You have to work with the teachers, with the leaders, with the communities to ensure that, as Kofi Annan said, that it is a fundamental development tool that in the long run it will pay off. And that's why for us, our main mandate is the child.
Up with that, for the fellows that are in the field, are they on the government's payroll or they are on Teach for Uganda payroll?
Well, that's a great question, Priscilla. Thank you. When we started out, actually, the former permanent secretary, Mr. Alex Kapoza, we had shared our proposal, and he was willing and said the government is constrained with resources. We don't have the resources. So in the meantime, continue to operate. This is a wonderful innovation that helps our schools, helps our children get that equitable quality education that we all aspire for by 2030. So it was a wonderful letter that he shared with us. So we continued raising funding. We continued working hard. We raised funds. I told you that one of our local partners is DHL. Another one is Ernst & Young. We look for funds from corporates, from foundations globally. And now we still, at this point, we are still paying those teachers, our fellows in the schools. Plus, we are also paying for the training of our government teachers and the head teachers, because we look for school transformation.
Saga, on the aspect of digitization with regard to rural learners being able to use computers and other technologies in learning, tell us how that is entrenched in some of the districts that you are working in, and how the adaptation is going on, especially in light of the fact that there is now no physical instruction going on.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. So the best way I can answer that is that the government of Uganda and the Ministry of Education believes in a digitally competent teacher by 2040, a digitally competent teacher by 2040. And so when we really looked at COVID and the challenges, we actually piloted digital learning within Mayuge district, and we had launched in 5 sub-counties. So every sub-county in Mayuge, about 5 sub-counties, each school, there's a school that was selected, and it has a digital learning lab, meaning that we will have solar panels because there's no electricity in some of these communities. We have solar panels. We have also about 30 tablet computers, and the children are able to, after classrooms, go through with those tablets. Now, when COVID hit and such challenges, what happened is that then the fellows are able to create times where children can come through the lab, be able to learn, and also we dealt with the issue of internet and making sure that these tabs are not on internet. We have a device called Rachel, which only streams information for learning. It has no other information. So then kids are able to go through together with their teachers and be able to learn something. However, we have to say that it doesn't come without challenges. It has had some challenges very well, of course, of security, of ensuring that the storages are okay, that everything stays in touch, and also being able to quickly deal with the technology whenever they shut down or the power shuts down, so that the kids can come back and learn amicably. So the aim of our fund is that we scale that at least to the next 10 other schools, and then we study them and see the impact of digitization of education in our schools, and then request for more support either from government or from multilateral partners.
That would present as a solution, actually, Mr. Kasaga, in terms of adaptation of ICT into the education system. At such a time as this, 15 days down the road, arts teachers on strike, we don't know how long this strike is going to take, meaning that children are suffering, especially in terms of receipt of education. It's the second term. You do have candidates on pressure, mock exams around the corner. How is it not an opportunity for us to adopt ICT right now, the technology that you're talking about right now, to actually conduct arts classes online in terms of content, give it to the students, let them consume it, and then monitoring and evaluation can be in accordance to, the structure that you have with the fellows?
I mean, great questions. You are all Ugandans, and I love your questions, and I love that I'm here. I welcome you to support us, to support government and all of us to really get there, because when we get to these communities, we are told the resources are not enough to be able to digitize, these schools. So what we do, we raise resources from other partners out there. And actually, we've been reaching out to entities like MTN and Airtel to support us, because actually, you are right, Priscilla, the way to go is digitization, because we clearly seen that with this challenge of, let's say, this empathy between the government and the teachers, if the children of our rural learners, who are 80% of Uganda's children, which we know is literally about 15 million children in school, it would be so helpful for them to have access to digital learning. Now, we are piloting it. We are doing our best that we can with the resources we have, but we don't have the resources to go across the country. If we had the resources, we would go across the country. And so that's why we want to call multilateral partners, government, and even corporates that like Airtel or MTN to really work with partners like us who are trying to extend this digitization of learning, of education for rural learners. Because in the end, it's the entire Uganda that suffers. The children in Kampala, of course, will continue to learn just as they did in COVID. But what about the 80% of our children in rural Uganda?
Uganda, Teach for Uganda rather, is working exclusively to ensure that children get a better experience in the receipt of education. Now, in the past 5 years, there's been a transition to a thematic curriculum that allows for teaching in local languages. Apparently, according to technocrats, students and early learners adopt better and understand most concepts if they are explained to them in their local languages. Are you adopting this too? And if you are, how is it working in relation to already established systems of instruction?
Great question. That is a decision, the instruction of thematic curriculum that was made by government and partners, especially through the Ministry of Education, and was passed. And that thematic curriculum runs from grade 1, P1 up to P3. So for us, the way we actually right now we are placing in P1 and P2 because we have seen that the foundations of early childhood learning and education actually prepares children for the long term. Because once the children have lost the foundation between the ages of 3 and 6, then they are not able to really catch up. So the thematic curriculum is trained by, the teachers are trained on the thematic curriculum. For us, we train through the English learning. So in the communities where we work with the teachers of the language instruction, and for us, we instruct in English because we believe that as the other teachers are helping the kids learn in the other language, there is also a part like English as a thematic language should be taught so that they can be able to catch up eventually as they get to P3, P4, so that they are not lost. So we come in to support the thematic curriculum, but we do it in a way that brings in English as a language, just as Lusoga or Uganda would be a language. And as they transition to up to P3, they are actually starting to understand the connections between the local language and English as well. So that because eventually the national exams, they don't discriminate, they will be all in English. So then we feel like it would be more of a disadvantage when the children get to P4 and they do not know how to be able to communicate in English. So we do support, but we support the current teacher who is teaching in the local language, while for us, we are getting them acquainted with the English as they transition towards the other upper classes.
James Kasaga Arinaitwe from Teach for Uganda. There, many thanks for the insight and the perspective. It's something that we are learning, especially when it comes to the adaptation with regard to the industrial action that is currently going. Now, let me ask you this. It's something that you could be aware of as a parent. Would you right now recommend private education ahead of government government schools? Because what we know is education is going on, or rather instruction is going on in private schools because they are not affected by this whole thing. How are you playing that particular card as people who are involved in the education system in the way that you do your work at Teach for Uganda?
If I get your question very well, you're saying, would I recommend, I missed a bit, would I recommend private education as to replace public education? Is that the question, Chris?
Because right now, there are students and learners who are seamlessly continuing with education as others affected by the industrial action of the teachers.
True.
With regard to that crisis, what do you see happening next if the industrial action continues?
Yeah, it's a big challenge. And for us, really, one, we are a firm believer in public education system because it does provide opportunities for all children. That's why they call it Monaba Some. That's why some of us came through that. As a young man myself, I lost my family between the ages of 4 and 10. I was raised in rural Kashari. I didn't come to Kampala until I was 13 years old. I went through a UPE school and was able actually to do well and was admitted at Ntare. So ideally, it would be great if we could all work together. I would call on private entities like companies, whether you are a bank, whether you are a telecom company, whether you are a consulting firm, that education should be a matter for all of us. That's why at Teach for Uganda, we believe that we are nurturing leaders who are committed to advancing equitable quality education to all children in Uganda, because we believe that without a foundational education for our nation, the opportunities for development will be limited. The opportunities to leapfrog to middle incomehood will be limited, because these are people who will not compete with the Chinese counterparts. These are people who will not compete with the Indian counterparts. These are not people who will compete with the American counterparts. So we need everyone from multilateral partners to really work together with NGOs like ourselves, with government in partnership, not necessarily in fighting, to ensure that we strengthen public education system. I guarantee you that our curriculum is actually fantastic. The challenge that we have is the way it is implemented, right? Because you see some of us who went through it and had great teachers, we are here, you know, and we are able to communicate. We are able to create businesses. I told you that my dear wife is a physician, is a doctor who has treated millions of people. So, and went through a UPE school. So the point is not to bring private education and replace public. The idea is, can we strengthen the public education to give every rural learner an opportunity for upward mobility? And that will take all partners. And my request is that, can the elephants that are fighting, you know, in Africa, we say that when the two elephants are fighting, the grass suffers. Could the two elephants please find an amicable way in partnership with our development partners to come on the ground and actually have a laid out way of how they could teachers could return to school, the learning continues while they discuss the matters of finances and all that. Otherwise, in the end, you, my dear friends, myself, we lose out. Our children will come into a country that is so divided that you don't want those kids to come to. So we need a very strong public education system.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to pick it up right there. The elephants fighting in the room and the grass that is suffering. Do stay with us.
We're glad you're still with us here on Morning at NTV. Let's now go into our very last remarks from Mr. James Kasaga Arinaitre, the CEO at Teach for Uganda, with regard to the industrial action that is going on as one of the stakeholders in the education industry. Mr. Kasaga, I would like your last words to teachers, to government, to parents, and most importantly, to the pupils and students of the extension.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I wanted to really read us this quote so that really I remind us of the greatest importance of education to our wonderful government, to our teachers, to our stakeholders in education. It was Kofi Annan who said that education is a human right with immense power to transform. On its foundation rests the cornerstones of freedom, democracy, and sustainable human development. I will say again that on its foundation rests the cornerstones of freedom, democracy, and sustainable human development. I believe that Africa, not just Uganda, will only transform itself to have fully-fledged freedom, developing democracy that works, and sustainable development if we really work together to invest in education for all our children, not just the few that have the resources and the money and come from middle income and high income community families, but actually all the 80% of our rural and low income earners that need this great education. We can tell from our leaders, whether it is our president, whether it is our ministers who came, if you ask them at one point, those who came at least by the 1960s and 70s, they had to go through a public education system. And that's why at Teach for Uganda, we do believe that we need to work with either it's our multilateral partners, whether it's the World Bank or others. We call upon them, we call upon the government, we call upon our teachers, and also remind them that please, as we understand the grievances that are going on, the challenges are there, but we also believe that they too went through a system, a school. This is all our system. And to strengthen it, just like a house, we have to reinforce all corners of the house to ensure that actually it's a strong house that can support a family. So I call upon government, I call upon multilateral partners, I call upon private entities too, because they will also need highly qualified people like yourselves to work in these private sectors. So I call upon them to work with teachers, to support the government, to address the issue of teachers and ensure that they return to school and our children are learning, and we strengthen our public education system to afford all children an opportunity to thrive. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. James Kasaga Harinaitwe, Chief Executive Officer at Teach for Uganda, for those perspectives on education in the country. Now, let's transition into our Tech Note this morning, where we are, of course, going to tackle one of the issues that